Hi, everyone. We're just going to wait a few minutes, wait for people to join us.
Scott, can you make Eunice host? The participant list changed when I went to do that.
Okay, let me see if I can do that. Okay, that should have worked.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We're just going to wait a few minutes. I'm going to ask everyone to mute themselves and turn off your video so we can get started, hopefully, in a few minutes. Thank you.
Eunice, you might have to make Scott a co-host again. It doesn't look like he has.
I don't know if I need to be a co-host at this point, do I? Yeah, I did.
I did it.
Okay, perfect.
So we will be recording this webinar, and it will be live on channel 21, just to let everyone know. I'm just going to wait a couple more minutes, and then we'll get started. So for anyone who's already joined us, I'm Eunice Kim, and we're going to be giving a presentation on the Salem project. We're just going to wait a couple more minutes, and then we'll get started. If everyone could mute yourselves and turn off your video, that would be great. We will be recording this again, and it will be available on our project website, and it will be running on channel 21 a few times in the next couple weeks as well. Okay, I think we're going to get started, and if people will trickle in, that's great. And we're going to record this. So hi, everyone. I'm Eunice Kim. I'm the Long Range Planning Manager from the City of Salem. With me today is a lot of folks. I'll just introduce a few. Lisa Anderson Ogilvie is here. She's the Deputy Director of Community Development for the city, as well as the Planning Administrator. Austin Ross, Long Range Planner, is here as well. We have a few members of our consultant team, Freganesi Associates here, including Scott Freganesi, and I think Violet Brown will be joining us as well. And then from Public Works, Julie Warnke is here, as well as Patricia Farr and a few others. So again, I just wanted to ask everyone to mute themselves and to turn off the video. We are recording this, and so if you miss it and you want to watch it again, or if you just want to watch it again, it will be on our project website, as well as on channel 21. We will be doing a short presentation. If you saw our work session last week, it'll be similar to that presentation, and then we'll be doing Q&A at the end. If you have questions, please drop them in the chat, and then we will go through the questions at the end of the presentation. And if you're joining us on the phone, we will also give an opportunity for you all to join as well. So with that, I'm going to just start, and then hopefully as people join, they can catch up. So again, I'm Eunice Kim, and today we're going to be giving an update on the Our Salem project. Specifically, we're going to be talking a little bit about the draft vision. So just as a reminder, the Our Salem project is a project to update our comprehensive plan. And so our comprehensive plan really are the high-level goals and policies and the map that guide future growth and development in the Salem area. So this really impacts everything from where different types of businesses and housing are located in the city to kind of our priorities for the transportation system, our impacts on the environment. So it's really the broad-reaching goals and policies that guide our growth going into the future. So just as a reminder, our comprehensive plan guides growth not just in our city limits, which is the black dashed line you see on this map, but also our portion of the urban growth boundary. So some of the unincorporated areas of Marion and Polk County are also part of our comprehensive plan. So if you've heard, you know that we're growing and there's going to be 60,000 more people by 2035. That's for our portion of the urban growth boundary, that gray area. So we've seen a lot of development in recent years, and we're continuing to see development. So this is really our opportunity to plan for that growth, to really understand where people will live, where they will work, how they will move about the community, and kind of what those impacts will be on the environment. So I think this is a very exciting project. So we kicked off this visioning phase over a year ago now, where we've really been out and about in the community, talking to people about what their priorities are for growth. We moved into scenarios or just different options for how we could grow in the spring. And now we're at the draft vision. This is definitely a major milestone in the project, but it is very much a draft at this point. So when we talk about the draft vision, the goals, some high-level policies, as well as the map, we do understand that this is kind of our first draft, and we plan to get input from the community to refine it going forward. So we've been doing a lot of outreach over the last year or so. We've done some traditional means of outreach where we've been at community meetings, we've had events and workshops, but we've also kind of had to pivot given this pandemic and done some kind of new ways of outreach, including webinars like this one. We had a similar webinar, I think back in April. We've done some Facebook Live events and other kind of ways of virtually meeting. We've relied heavily on our community partners throughout this project, and we're very fortunate that we've been invited to continue to involve those community groups. So we've engaged with more than 80 groups across the community that really represent a wide variety of perspectives. And that's really our goal, is to make sure that we're hearing from all different corners of the Salem area. We've attended more than 120 in-person and virtual meetings, and we plan to do so as we continue doing outreach on this project. So we've done a lot of surveys, as I'm sure you're all aware, through this project. I'm going to touch on just the most recent 3 and kind of what the major takeaways were. The first survey we did was in the spring, and it really was trying to get at what are the high-level priorities that the community have as it relates to growth. You see some examples here on this screen. There are a lot of shared priorities in the community, whether it is making sure we have housing that's affordable to the community, supporting our small businesses, making sure we protect our air and water quality. So we really used all of this input to inform the draft goals that we'll be talking about today that are in the draft vision. We also did a survey on scenarios in the spring. And again, scenarios are really just different options for how we could grow. What we were trying to understand from the community is, where did people want to see different types of development? So were there businesses that they wanted to see in certain areas, different types of housing in different areas? And so there were 4 scenarios. And we were trying to make sure that we were not asking people to choose the A, B, or C, one of the scenarios, but really asking them, what do you like and dislike about each one? So we used a lot of that input to inform the proposed comp plan map that we will again talk about later today. So the neighborhood hub idea is something that really came out of our conversations in the community. A neighborhood hub is essentially a small scale business that is located within a residential area, a residential neighborhood that really serves those neighbors. So we're thinking very small scale, like a baker or a barber, a shop. And we wanted to understand, because there was a lot of consensus generally about liking this neighborhood hub idea, we wanted to understand, what do people really think in terms of where they should be located, how big should they be? So we generally heard from our survey on neighborhood hubs that people wanted to see these hubs kind of on busier streets or at intersections, so not kind of in the middle of a local street. They wanted to see them as smaller clusters. There was a real concern that they didn't take over neighborhoods, and design really mattered to people. So in terms of how they looked and really fit into the neighborhood. So these are ideas that we took into consideration, where we were both proposing to locate some of them on the proposed comp plan map, as well as we're kind of thinking through, what would a new zone look like? What would be the kind of standards that we would put in that zone? So we'll talk about that later as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the draft vision. And just again, as a reminder, the draft vision really includes the high level goals and then the map that we are anticipating would, if accepted by the community and the council, eventually be in the updated comprehensive plan. So really, we're at the vision phase still. So here's a vision statement that we really wanted to make sure captures some of those shared priorities I talked about earlier. So we've heard throughout this process that sustainability, equitability, and making sure we're prosperous are part of this vision. And so we've included that. And then you'll see references to affordable housing, safe transportation choices, local businesses, and the environment. We have started to hear some input already from the community about how we should tweak and maybe add on to this vision. And so hopefully we will do that as well as we continue to get input. So I want to touch on some of the draft goals in the vision, which is available online. And but before I did that, I just wanted to kind of explain that these goals are very high level. They're really kind of aspirational in terms of what we hope Salem will become in the future. And so if the council and the community, if you all agree that these are goals that really represent our vision for the future, we will carry them forward and actually include them in the updated comprehensive plan. We have also heard a lot of input on details of what's important to the community. And so we have included some potential policies in the appendix of our draft vision, but we will continue to work on those detailed policies. We will update them, we will add to them later this spring. So our goals that we've included in the draft vision really cover a broad range of topics, from community engagement to housing, to parks and recreation, to transportation. And so they're pretty far reaching. And eventually, if again, there's agreement on these high level goals, these would become chapters in the updated comprehensive plan. So here's just a couple of examples of the draft goals that we have. We've heard throughout the process that engagement and how we do engagement is really important. We've heard that people want to make sure that we are transparent in our engagement, we're equitable, we're inclusive, and that the engagement that happens from the city and in the community really does lead to meaningful change and meaningful input. And so we have a draft goal here on community engagement. This idea of complete neighborhoods is also something that's been pretty much, I think, really talked about throughout this process, where people have been telling us they really want to be able to live in an area where they can access their jobs, amenities, services, and in an easy way, whether that's walking, biking, or taking transit. So we've added a draft goal that's specific to complete neighborhoods to make sure that we're thinking about this when we are proposing where different types of housing and where new housing should be developed in the community. We also have a lot of goals on economic development, stemming everything from making sure we have a very strong local economy to making sure people just have access to jobs. And so the city is also going to be working on an economic development strategy. So we'll be coordinating with them, with urban development, as they kind of work on the more immediate steps in terms of economic development, kind of the recovery, and what needs to happen in the next 5 or so years. Greenhouse gas emissions has been a priority that's been discussed in this community for the last several years. And so we have incorporated a broad goal about reducing greenhouse gas emissions. As you all know, we're also kicking off a climate action plan. And so the work that is done as part of that project will be incorporated into the comp plan. So as an example, if there's an actual target for GHG reductions that is established as part of the climate action plan, we will be incorporating that into the comp plan. And there's a lot of goals related to transportation. Transportation is definitely a priority in this community. And so one of the new ideas that have come out of this vision is the idea of complete streets. So while our transportation system really speaks to all the different types of modes already, it doesn't specifically call out complete streets. And so we wanted to make sure we did that in the draft goals. So you can see here the goal talks about all different types of transportation modes, including new and emerging transportation modes, micromobility, for example. A lot of things are changing very quickly, and we want to make sure we capture that in our draft goals. We also have a specific goal related to GHG reductions and transportation. We know that from our GHG inventory earlier in this project that transportation is the major cause of GHG emissions in Salem. So we wanted to make sure we had a goal specific to that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the map, our proposed comprehensive plan map that you can find in the vision. And so this, again, was informed by all the input that we've gotten from the community, including the input on those scenarios. So as you guys all are aware, we've done a lot of dot voting through this process. We've had dot voting online, at community meetings, at different events. And we've really used that information to create those scenarios that I talked about earlier. From those scenarios, we are now at the proposed comprehensive plan map, which again is just a first draft. So we're really looking forward to input from the community about what we got right, what we should change. There are 4 big ideas that we tried to make sure we kept in mind as we put together this proposed comprehensive plan map. The first has to do with housing. We've heard pretty loud and clear from the community that everyone wants the multifamily housing to really be distributed across the community, as opposed to being concentrated in one neighborhood versus another. We know we need more multifamily housing in Salem based on our housing needs analysis. And so we made sure that we are accommodating that growth in terms of having enough units of multifamily housing. We're also working on incorporating House Bill 2001 into the Our Salem project. So you might be aware that House Bill 2001 is going to mandate that cities accommodate up to 4 units of housing, like a 4-plex, in our single family areas. And so we've done kind of a brief analysis on what that looks like. And essentially that would be roughly, I think, more than 50% of our single family RS zone lots would have to accommodate a triplex or a 4-plex, and then over 89, I think, percent would have to accommodate a triplex. So we are incorporating that into this plan. We've heard a lot about mixed use and the idea of making sure that there's a mix of uses that are allowed more broadly in the community, specifically around downtown and our corridors with frequent transit service. When we talk about mixed use in the community, though, we've heard that people want flexibility in terms of allowing commercial uses, allowing residential uses, or allowing them together, but not necessarily mandating that every property that's designated mixed use be developed as mixed use. So that's just an important clarification that we're really talking about opening up how people can use their property in these areas that would be designated mixed use. We've talked a little bit about the neighborhood hubs. People want to see them distributed across Salem, and so we've done that in the proposed comp plan map. And then in terms of commercial uses, we've heard that people really want to make sure that commercial uses can be broadly allowed across Salem and in different ways. And so we've tried to think about, are there different ways that people could start businesses or run businesses out of their home? So we've been trying to think about live workspaces as an example. And then also just our industrial areas in the community, people have really wanted to kind of keep generally where they are today and if anything, expand where they're currently located. So these are the proposed changes on a map. You can see the pink on this map is mixed use. The purple is what's called industrial commercial. So these are some areas where we would allow both commercial uses and industrial uses. The orange is multifamily, and then you'll see a few other colors on there as well. If you want to see all the changes at once, you can see the proposed comprehensive plan map here. It's available on our website as a PDF, but we also created an interactive map, and I'll just quickly show you all kind of what that looks like. So hopefully you can all see this. This is an interactive map that we created so that if you have questions about what's being proposed in my area, on my property, in my neighborhood, you can enter an address. I'll just enter one here. And then you can go specifically to that property. And you can see what is the existing designation. So the existing designation of this property on Lancaster is commercial. And you can see what we're proposing. And that would be mixed use. And so we wanted to clarify kind of what we meant by mixed use. So if you click on this for more information, it will bring you to a website that explains again what we mean by all those different symbols. You can also just kind of turn on and off layers if you want to see the changes all at once. You can do that. And then if you want to kind of compare what's there today versus what's proposed, we have this kind of slider tool. So that's available on our project website. And I think it will be in our chat as well. And then I'm just going to quickly go back to our presentation. So the last thing we did was we created what's called a preferred scenario. And the reason we did this is that throughout this project, we've really wanted to make sure we could evaluate how these future scenarios would perform against different priorities in the community. So access to transit, GHG, for example. And so this is really our best guess at what potentially could develop by 2035 based on the proposed comp plan map. So it's different than the comp plan map itself. So for example, on the proposed comp plan map, we're showing Lancaster as all mixed use. We don't think by 2035, all of Lancaster will redevelop or infill as mixed use. So certain properties have been chosen as potentials for development by 2035. So we ran this through our model that we've been using throughout this project. And I'll just go through some of those indicator results. If you recall from this whole project, we've been having indicator results. So the first is access to frequent transit. You can see here the preferred scenario is performing better than what we're calling current trends. And current trends is really, if we were to keep growing as we've been growing and made no changes to our vision and our comp plan map, what would we look like? And here you'll see that we have more new housing and new employment located close to our frequent transit routes. And that was intentional. It was something that we tried to do to make sure that people had access to frequent transit as we grow and develop. I talked a little bit about complete neighborhoods. Our preferred scenario performs better than current trends in terms of more people being able to live close to parks, schools, grocery stores, businesses, etc. So we've also ran our ran our preferred scenario through the council government's transportation model to understand what the impact would be on transportation. And as you can see here, there's not a significant change in how people would move about the city. There's a lot of reasons for that. We've done a lot of deep dives on that. And one of the reasons is that the model is not it's not very sensitive to land use changes alone. There are other changes that we could make. For example, if we added more transit service or changed the frequency of transit service, you would see a change in this kind of mode split indicator. Or for example, we priced parking so that it was more expensive to park your car, we would probably see a shift. And so there's a lot of reasons that our preferred scenario did not perform as well as some may have wanted. And so that really kind of plays into this greenhouse gas emissions inventory. So you can see that the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions as it relates to transportation, this pink bar, did not go down significantly. And so there's a lot of work we can do related to GHG emissions, and a lot of that work will be done in the Climate Action Plan. We plan to work very closely with Public Works and the rest of the city working on this project. And there could be specific actions, benchmarks, policies that come out of that work that we will incorporate into the comp plan map as well, and the comp plan itself. So just really quickly, we do have a survey on our project website to get input from you all. And then we will be having virtual meetings. We have 25 to 30 meetings between October and November to make sure we are hearing from the community. We'll take all of that input and revise the draft vision and hopefully bring it back to council for acceptance in late January or early February. We're not asking for adoption, we're just asking for some direction to make sure that we're all on the same page on the high level goals and the map, so that when we get into the policies, we get into the zoning code, the zoning map, we're all on the same page again. Our goal is to bring this all forward for adoption by the end of the year. So quick sharing my screen and see if there's any questions in the chat. Let me pull that up. My speak is, can everyone hear me?
Yeah, it works well. It was a little bit fuzzy a couple times, but we could hear you.
Oh, okay. I see something that says your speaker is not working. Okay, so let me see if there's, Austin, is there any questions in the chat? pull it up.
No questions have come in the chat yet, but people are welcome to put some in there and we'll take care of them. And
Yeah.
if you're on the phone, you're welcome to unmute yourself if you have a question.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, this is Scott Freganesi. I just wanted to add that I think there might be a little confusion on that this is the actual plan, and it's the draft vision, so it lays out the goals. As Eunice mentioned, we're going to be working throughout the next several months on those policies and actions to actually implement the plan. So that's why you don't see every chapter of the comp plan and you just see a lot of goals. So I just wanted to make that clear that we are continuing to work on this, and we will continue to do as much public outreach as necessary.
Eunice,
Yeah, and it looks like the first question is about when will the text of the comp plan come out? And so the idea is that the goals that you see in the draft vision, if they're accepted, again, we would actually carry those forward into the comp plan. And then Appendix A has a lot of draft policies and draft ideas that we will flush out this spring. And then they would be carried forward as the text of the comp plan. So we're kind of doing it in pieces, starting at the higher level, and then we'll move more into details. Does that answer the question, Victoria? And then there's a question here, how can we incentivize complete neighborhoods and more infill development? Sure, and so, we are trying at least at the map level to at least allow those mix of uses and infill and different uses closer to each other, but we can incentivize it. So for example, the city council earlier this year, or maybe it was last year now, they made so that there's no parking requirement for multifamily housing along our core network, the transit's core network. So basically those are our major corridors with frequent transit service. And that incentivizes, for example, the development of multifamily in those areas. So there are different levers we could pull in terms of the zoning code, and we could work that into the updates that we make. There's also obviously incentives when it comes to financial incentives. And so we would work with urban development on that. But in terms of zoning, we can make it easier process-wise, for example, to do development. So not do a lot of review processes, for example, for different types of infill or different types of development. And so that's something that we'll be working on. And Scott and his team will be helping us with an implementation plan that really focuses on what are those changes we need to make, whether it's zoning or otherwise, to really make sure that this comp plan vision moves forward. Do you want to add anything to that, Scott?
Yeah, I would just say that the financial thing is there are financial incentives for both residential, for example, vertical housing tax credits that you can do. There's a whole host of different tools that we're going to examine and see if they make sense. And that will be part of that implementation plan.
Eunice, this is Steve Anderson for you and Scott, West Salem Neighborhood Association. You've got some key components in here which look very good, but on your timelines, the transportation corridor, the economic development, and these issues, where do those fit in terms of timing and policy and the final plan? Because some of the decisions will be driven by some of those key issues that you've highlighted here. So how do they start piecing together, and when do you see them coming together so we can comment?
Sure. So we plan to have weekly policy related or focused meetings in the spring. So once we get direction from the council that these goals generally are okay and the comp plan map generally as proposed is okay, we will deep dive into those policies. And that'll be an iterative process. We'll put up draft policies, get feedback, revise them, put them back online. And so we plan to do a lot of outreach in the spring on those policies. Does that help?
Thank you.
Eunice, that kind of goes along with the next question, which was
okay, what's that?
Basically, what stage do you expect to formally solicit written public comment? I think
now and forever.
Now and forever, and during those policy meetings. So,
yeah, we have a survey online about the high-level goals, the vision statement, and the map. You're welcome to put any other information that you'd like to include as well there. So let's see, what's next question?
There's one about Lancaster.
Mixed use on ugly Stroads doesn't make sense. Who would want to live there? Doesn't the Stroad have to be converted first?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so we've talked with Public Works, and I don't know if Julie wants to jump in, but we've talked with Public Works about, are there changes that we can make to those busier streets that make them more pedestrian friendly, whether that's crossings or new design, or even the existing designs. The existing designs for those arterials does include a landscape median, for example. And so that's ongoing work. Julie, did you want to jump in? And if not, that's fine.
Yeah, I would also just say that when you're looking at those roads, a lot of times some are not city owned. We have to work with state roads and county roads, so some partnership there. But I agree that, you know, when you start converting areas that are heavily commercial into places that people live, streetscape improvements are really going to be a necessary thing.
Right, and I guess I would just jump in and say that we will, you know, we are going to be looking at the transportation system plan and identifying projects that might need to be added to the plan to support the vision. And so that could include some changes to the streetscape. I would caution, however, that I've seen some images out there of, you know, boulevards with, you know, lovely parkways along them, and just want to make sure that people realize that we only have so much space. And so if you decide you want some sort of boulevard with, you know, tree lined local circulation that takes 150 feet of width, then that is going to eat into your development potential and add to the costs of projects. So that will be a dialogue we'll be having as we look at what needs to change in the transportation system plan in order to implement the vision.
It looks like there's a question about explain why you say this is not sensitive to land use impacts on greenhouse gas emissions. Yeah, and so we have had a lot of conversations with the COG about their model and kind of what it is. And one of the reasons is because we have already a very much built out community, and the increment of change that we're making is not a ton in terms of the overall acreage and the overall kind of division of where jobs are versus housing is. I think that what we've been told is that things that would make it more expensive to drive your car, essentially, operational costs would have a bigger impact on the mode split, as well as, for example, again, transit. So Julie, you popped up. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say that one of the things that, for example, that I learned is that the model tool that is used at the regional level, it doesn't respond to changes in your bicycle and pedestrian network. And so, for example, if we, you know, through the TSP amendments, if we were to build, you know, the most beautiful bicycle pedestrian network, the model is not a tool that responds to that. It just, that's irrelevant, even though in reality, I think most of us know that that does make a difference on people's choices of how they travel. And then the other sort of another key issue relates to the transit network. And we did not propose any changes to the transit network because that really isn't our, you know, within our purview. However, the transit district is embarking on a long range transit plan, the first one that they've really done, and they're embarking on that very soon. And we are going to work closely with them to try to really marry together how they see the future of the transit system with our land use vision. Of course, their boundaries are greater than the city of Salem, but a lot of the industrial land that we have, so a lot of the new jobs are put down in that southeast area of Salem, Mill Creek Corporate Center area, and that really doesn't have very good transit access now. And so that's also something that, you know, influenced the model. So because the model does include a transit component, does not include a bike ped component. So it's frustrating to me that we don't have the best tool to really measure this vision of more mixed use and complete.
And I would just add, the last thing I would add is that there was no assumptions in terms of fleet change. So if you could make assumptions on 20%, 30%, 40% electric fleet change, you could see reductions in that as well. So that could be another reason.
Yeah, and the state is also going to be kicking off some rulemaking targeted at essentially reducing GHG emissions. And so there will be rules coming down from the state that we will have to follow in terms of, you know, mixed use, similar to what we're doing, and potentially related to parking. And so we're going to be following that as well. And that's all going to be happening at the same time next year as we're working on the details of this plan. So there's another question about where in the interactive map do you show where residential zones don't allow middle housing? If not the interactive map, where can we find that? So the state's also doing rulemaking on House Bill 2001, kind of the where we would have to allow triplexes and fourplexes. They've had a first kind of hearing on that. And so what we know so far is that we could potentially have to allow triplexes on all single family lots that 5,000 square feet or more, and a fourplex on lots that are 7,000 square feet or more. So we will start doing our analysis and kind of looking at on a map where those would go. But we haven't done that because those rules haven't been adopted yet. And we just want to make sure that those are firm before we kind of launch into that work. But we will let people know when we've done those maps. If the council adopts GHG reduction goals, will that be incorporated into the vision? Yes. If the council adopts any sort of goals related to GHG that come out of the climate action plan, we can incorporate that directly into the comp plan. I think that's all the questions. Austin, did I miss any?
I think you got all of them so far.
Okay. I don't know if there's anyone on the phone.
It looks like one more just came in.
Okay. If the city is using, if the tool the city is using doesn't show impacts, does the city propose appropriately evaluating the plan's impact on them? I anticipate that a lot of that work of specific strategies that have a significant impact on GHG reductions will come out of the work of the climate action plan. That plan and project really is focused on GHG emissions reductions as well as resiliency. And so I think a lot of that work will actually come out of that plan.
Yeah,
Julie,
and
you popped open.
I would say that also that the scenarios did show impacts in lots of different areas, just not, some of them weren't because of the tools we're using. So we did learn a lot from them, and it did allow us to, you know, develop the plan map changes as well as the goals. So it's just that some of the indicators really didn't show a whole lot of impact. Sometimes you learn from that, sometimes you don't.
And I just would add that the same rulemaking that Eunice mentioned that the state has launched, one of the goals of that rulemaking is to do sort of regional level scenario planning in the Salem-Keizer area. So the rulemaking is going to take the next year, but it's possible that after that, we will be using sort of more of a regional, larger region-based tool that the Oregon Department of Transportation has developed, but we'll have to stay tuned for that. In the meantime, I think that the strategies that we are recommending do have an impact on GHG reduction.
Thank you, Julie. So there's a question here on our Salem being a few steps ahead of the Salem Climate Action Plan. And that's true. We did start this project 2 years ago. But our adoption timeframe is very similar. So again, I think a lot of the work on the Climate Action Plan will be done, you know, starting now, but also through next year. And so if we get a goal, a target, for example, in like July from the Climate Action Plan, it's not too late to incorporate it into the comp plan because we plan to take the comp plan through the adoption process later next year. So we will make sure that we are setting up our timelines, and we're working very closely with Patricia Farrell, who's leading that project. So I know we started sooner, but we will incorporate that work. Are there any other questions? No? Is there anything that the team on our side wanted to add? Did I miss anything? Another question. Neighborhood hubs seem critical to GHG reductions. How can they be encouraged or incented? Yeah, that's a good question, because for neighborhood hubs, what we're envisioning is that you could still do your single family home, because a lot of these hubs are going to be, again, in single family areas. And so we're trying to make it so that the process, first and foremost, is very simple. You don't have to go through an additional process. You just have to meet the standards that are in that zone and you can do it. But other ways of encouraging, that's a good question. That's something we'll have to think about when we get to implementation.
Yeah, and I think one of the things about those neighborhood hubs is you don't really have a great example of someone coming in and doing one yet. But from my experience, when you get someone who's that kind of that first one in and and successful, you'll start seeing them happen other places because, they realize that they're a good thing for the community. They're something that's desirable. So that first example is going to be really important to have happen. And sometimes the city can help with that first example, and that just gets the ball rolling.
Looks like we have a couple more questions here. Where can we send comments for comp plan text? You can put them in the survey. We ask specific questions about goals, or you can just email them to me. It's ekim@cityofsalem.net. I'm happy to take direct emails from you. You may get a goal for GHG reductions in October or November. At least 2 counselors are working on bringing that forward. And so we'll just continue to work on the timing. We know that this is important, and so we will not, move forward with the comp and regardless of where that climate action plan is. So we'll just continue working together on that. I do know from, just working on the climate action plan personally with Patricia that there needs to be a little bit of work before those goals and targets for GHG reductions can be set. And so maybe it's not July, maybe it is in the fall, but we'll continue tracking that. Are townhouses included in the definition of middle housing? It is. Townhouses and cottage cluster. Those will also be allowed more broadly in the city based on House Bill 2001. And we will be incorporating that work as well. Oh, we have many more comments. There's my email. Will there be requirements for off-street parking when considering single-family zoning? Single-family is all right. Yeah, so the state is going to set requirements in terms of how much parking we can require for a triplex or a fourplex. Right now, it's pretty much 1 per unit. So fourplex would be 4 parking spaces. So that's something we are waiting on, see, if that's confirmed or not at the rulemaking at the state level. But we could, that's kind of the minimum we would have to do. If the city wanted to push it and say no parking for triplex, for example, we could do that. I haven't heard that from the community, but we will be tracking that, and there'll be opportunities for the community to comment and give input. Is there any other questions? Scott, is there anything else you wanted to add? Or Julie or anyone else?
No, I don't have anything else right now.
Julie?
The only thing I wanted to add is I know that you've talked about doing the deep dive into the policies this spring. The other area that I believe you will be doing the deep dive into is the zoning for things like the neighborhood hubs. Is that correct?
Yes, and so we did, thank you for that. We got questions at the work session last week about putting out more details on what we mean by neighborhood hub and what we mean by R4. And R4 is really kind of a lived work zone that we would create that allows people to more broadly run a business out of their home. And so we're working on that now, and we will put that on our project website and push that out, on email and other ways when we have that ready. So those details are being worked out. But yes, more broadly on the zoning code, we will be working on that again once we have the direction from the council on the high level stuff. So there will be plenty of opportunities to give input throughout the year. Looks like there's a question from someone about optimum use of property. I'm not sure what that's referring to. Austin, did you find it?
I haven't yet.
Okay. We can always circle back, Kevin, if we can't. Oh, someone just put in.
It's a good comment. Take a look at that.
What did you want to say? Did you want to say something first?
Oh, I was just saying the comments about what optimized use of the land. So typically that refers to highest and best use, but it also allows, obviously the property owner the flexibility to do what they feel is the optimal use. But but that may be needed to flesh out a little bit better with a definition. That's a good point.
I believe that's in the current comp plan. I'm not sure that's out of the draft vision unless we pulled it up directly over, but that's definitely a policy in the current comp plan. So I'm not sure that will be in the new comp plan.
Thank you.
Is the city still expecting to take until early 2022? No, for House Bill 2001, we've decided to incorporate that work into the Our Salem project because there's going to be so many changes to so many different zones and the code. So we're going to do that at the same time as Our Salem. So we anticipate whenever we adopt an updated comp plan, the zoning that goes along with it, the zoning map, we will have implemented House Bill 2001. So while our deadline, I think, for adoption is June 30th, 2022 for House Bill 2001, we anticipate doing it in advance of that. Any other questions?
I would just say it's a really good idea to do it in advance because you'll get to learn from it and you can potentially make any changes you need to before the deadline in 2022.
And everything is related. And we've heard that people want a broader mix of housing generally, so it makes sense to incorporate it into the comp plan update. So I don't see any other questions. We have a few more minutes before the hour is up. But if everyone's done and no more questions, I just ask you all to visit the Our Salem project website online. That is where our survey is currently available in English and in Spanish. All of the draft plans are on there, the draft vision, as well as the indicator results. So all the indicator results, not just the ones I talked about today. And feel free to contact me anytime. If you have more questions that come up, if you think about them later, feel free to call me or email me. So thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate the time. And this will be available on our website soon. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.